Dirty Birds, what's up? And welcome to another edition, a special edition of Falcons Final Whistle presented by Zaxby's. I'm your host, Will McFadden. I'm joined, as always, by Tori McElhaney and Taryn Walk. We are going to give out some awards today, but honestly, the biggest award given out this week was to our very own Tori McElhaney. Tori was named National Sports Media Association Georgia Sportswriter of the Year. That is a mouthful, but it is a mouthful for a big award. The first woman to ever win this award, and it's been going, since like 1959?
Yeah.
That's crazy. Congratulations.
Thank you. First woman from the state of Georgia to win, and first team-affiliated person to win. It's not... I'm like really emotional about it. I was like, when I found out, I was kind of like crying on and off like pretty much all day long because...
You keep saying that, but I haven't seen you cry yet, and I want you to just start bawling if you could right now on the podcast.
Right now.
Weep. Just weep into the microphone.
I don't know how to handle tears.
Hashtag content. We're doing it for the content. But no, it's kind of just like incredibly validating, one, because I didn't even think that I could be nominated for this award, let alone win it. And the fact that it's not lost on me that I'm the first woman from the state to be recognized in this way. I know I've said this at multiple junctions, but it feels like just a really good time for me to say that for women in sports, like, you deserve to have a seat at the table, and not just one seat at the table, but many seats at the table. As many seats as there are, you deserve to take up space, and doors deserve to be open for you because you deserve to be in the room where things are happening. And I hope that this, as much as what an accomplishment I feel like for myself and as happy I am for myself, I also think that it matters greatly to the next generation of female reporters that are coming up as well, that they can now see that a woman can do this as well. Sorry, I'm about to start crying again, but like, I really am super grateful and super thankful. And yeah, I don't really know what to say. I've heard from so many people, and if I haven't like reached back out, or I haven't like liked your Twitter message or anything like that, I've seen everything, and it has been truly very, very special, especially in the wake of losing my mama back in October. The fact that I was awarded this award 2 days before her birthday was...
Oh, wow. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, it was incredibly special, I think, for me and my family as well. So thank you guys. Thank everybody. I just want to thank everybody for... I know it wasn't like a voting award, like for people who are listening, but I am super thankful for the Falcons fan base for trusting me with your news and respecting what I have to say.
Yeah. That's awesome. Again, congratulations. It's been an incredible year, right? Mm-hmm. Like I joined halfway through, but even being somebody who followed you for a long time and was aware of everything going on with this organization, I had immense respect for everything that you kind of like held together through a coaching change, through a tumultuous offseason that involved a quarterback being brought in twice.
Right,
so,
and again, retiring another one.
Yep.
Like, I think that's what people, the funniest thing is when people ask us, like, what do you do in the off season?
Everything.
And
that's when the real work
I
begins.
wish it was nothing.
Like, that's the thing is, like, I think people don't necessarily, especially last off season, it was like, okay, we went through a coaching search, new coaching hires, free agency got Kirk Cousins, Darnell Mooney, Matt Ryan retired and was put in the Ring of Honor. We did all of this stuff for the draft and OTAs and training camp, and all amongst all of that, we're working on Grady Jarrett a 10-year documentary. Taryn's working on a big Bajan project. We're hiring Will. Like,
there's nothing off about the offseason.
There was nothing off about what we did in 2024, and I'm just so proud of the work that we did collectively as a unit, as much as I am just myself as well.
And see, that is a great sales pitch for why everybody should stay tuned in to this podcast throughout the offseason, because it is very busy, and we will be covering all of it, free agency, the draft. Hopefully it's not as hectic as the one you just described, but it's going to be important. And so we're going to start, before we get to our final whistles, which are going to be some season-long awards and a good bit of fun, we're going to start with the importance of this offseason. And Taryn, we heard from General Manager Terry Fontenot today about kind of his mindset on the 2024 season and the road ahead. What was one of your biggest takeaways?
I think the thing that stood out to me most was how he handled answering questions when it came to these big off-season signings of veterans, because he did it in, like, I'm talking about Matthew Judon, Justin Simmons, even Kirk Cousins, because he did all that with the hope that it was a win now mentality. Not the hope. That was the plan. It was a win now mentality with the 2024 roster. And you didn't see that. And he acknowledged that that was the thought process behind all those guys, which makes me curious about how they're going to handle 2025, especially with those such as Matthew and Justin, who were on one-year deals. Like, do you bring them back, even though they didn't do necessarily what you wanted in 2024? Do you keep a win-now mentality, even though, say, like, your offense is super young? I think you have to keep the win-now mentality, but do you go about it differently than bringing in veterans thinking that they're the solution? Because in my mind, sometimes a veteran can just be a Band-Aid when you need to fully heal the wound.
Yeah, and I mean, you previously covered the Falcons' biggest foe in New Orleans, and I think there is really, few organizations as emblematic as a doubling down on the win now mentality over the last decade or so than New Orleans, right? They went from Drew Brees, but they said, hey, let's keep it rolling. We're keeping the band together, and they really tried to push it down, and now maybe they're trickling out now. So we'll see what the Falcons ultimately do this offseason, but yeah, they've got pieces that you like going into the year. So I do think they want to keep this thing going and obviously get into the playoffs. Tori, what was one of your biggest takeaways?
It had to do with the Kirk Cousins of it all and the decision that the organization has to make about what Kirk Cousins' future is in Atlanta and if there is a future in Atlanta. And that was the one thing that I think, because of the nature of the contract that he was dealt, $90 million fully guaranteed for 4 years, 2 years is what Terry said was fully guaranteed. And then also the reconciliation of the fact that that was a move that was cited in a tampering violation, so you lose a fifth-round draft pick, and now you're sitting there paying your backup quarterback, essentially having a cap hit in 2025 of $40 million. And that's a tough pill to swallow when the overarching plan and the overarching thought process was that Kirk Cousins was going to be the starter in Atlanta, and to Terry Fontenot's point, giving the organization high-level quarterback play for 2 seasons, and then you can bring Michael Penix in. That didn't happen, and so he has to stand up there and take the heat for that as the general manager. And everything that he said I thought was very interesting, because it was all a question of, like, what do you do with Kirk Cousins? Yep. That's the question. The crux of it is, you made the decision you did what you did. Now here you are. Kirk Cousins started 14 games. You're going with Michael Penix moving forward. What are you going to do with Kirk Cousins, who has 3 years left on this deal? Yeah. And Terry Fontenot essentially said that he's going to stay on the roster, and he is going to be the backup to Michael Penix Jr. There were reports right when the switch was made in mid-December that the Falcons were going to cut Kirk Cousins before his $10 million roster bonus went into effect the 1st of March in the league year, the new league year.
That Saturday after the move was made, Tuesday night, right?
Yeah. So it was very quickly that, like, there were national reports being like, oh, this is what they're going to do. The divorce is coming. That was kind of the prevailing message. And Terry Fontenot said there was no validity to those reports. The Falcons see themselves feeling comfortable enough, and that was the word he used, comfortable with keeping Kirk Cousins on the roster and as the backup to Michael Penix Jr. And in essence, I think this still leaves the door open for a trade. Yep. Kirk Cousins does have a no trade clause in his contract, but that can always be waived by Kirk Cousins and his camp. But to Terry's point, when he was asked about whether or not he was going to field calls for trade offers for Kirk Cousins, he said plainly, Kirk's agent, Kirk, his family, us, the other team, all of these, there's so many layers to it, and everybody has to be good with it, because otherwise it's not going to happen if you can't get everybody to agree. And so that takes the power out of the Falcons' hands and puts it into Kirk's hands, but that's the nature of this contract.
Well, and that's kind of the case, that it was always that way, right? Because I do think that proclamation did a really key thing. It said to all the teams in around the rest of the league, if you're the Browns, if you're the Jets, if you're the Raiders. And you're looking for a quarterback, hey, you got to go through us, and we have to then work with Kirk about maybe potentially working out a trade, but we're not going to release him. Right. We're totally happy with him staying on this roster, so if he wants to be a starter somewhere else, then maybe you got to look at that no trade clause a little bit differently. And if you're another team looking to come get him, he's not just going to hit the market anytime soon, right? So I do think that was an important message to send. And to your point about the cost, it is a little bit of the position itself, right? Like, that is the going rate of having a good quarterback room. it stinks that he is the backup and you're spending that money on that, but he's, arguably the best backup in the league outside of maybe a situation in like Pittsburgh where you kind of have maybe 2 1Bs instead of, a clear 1A. And the hope is that Michael Penix will be that moving forward for Atlanta. Mine was pretty plain and simple. I thought Terry from the jump was like, look, we didn't win enough games. We're very clear. I did the mailbag this morning, which you guys can read on AtlantaFalcons.com, and a lot of questions about like the frustration from this fan base, rightfully so, is at a very high level. And it was clear in both Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot's press conference that they get it. They understand, hey, look, we came into this with our own expectations. We're frustrated and pissed off too. I thought Raheem Morris after the game on Sunday was about as frank and just
for sure
laid it bare as I've ever seen him, right? And he is an upbeat guy by nature, but he'll call a spade a spade. And he did on Sunday. And so that was, I think, refreshing to hear. Now, whether or not it truly settles in for the fans and they take it to heart and they buy it, is another thing. But I did think it was important for him to say, I can sit up here and say whatever I want to say, but like that doesn't matter. The results have to speak for themselves. So that's the mindset.
Yeah. What gets me is it brings me back to the beginning of the season where they said the same thing.
Yeah, right.
I mean, we can talk all this positivity all we want, but the results need to do it. And here we are months later, and it's the same phrasing.
But that's what makes this sport so, on the one hand, compelling, and on the other hand, so frustrating at times, right? Is because every well-intentioned plan, to your point, they went all in this offseason in kind of a win-now mindset, and you didn't get the return from kind of the 3 key veteran guys that you would have expected to get the returns from. I mean, if there were 3 players going into September that you were like, who are you banking on? It would have been Kirk Cousins, Justin Simmons, and Matthew Judon as the newcomers. And
they're the all pros. They're the Pro Bowlers. Like, they're the ones with the history and the experience.
I was so excited when Justin Simmons came here. I was
Matthew
like,
Judon,
this man is incredible. Right.
Yeah.
Like, and again, that's not to say he had a bad season. And I don't want to get ahead of our awards here. And maybe this is a good way to just segue right into that. But yeah, it just kind of didn't all come out the way you thought it would.
The cannonball was a really small splash.
Exactly, right? You gave your best jump. You were high in the air. Everything was poised. And
I was thinking splash signings. And
it was like, bloop.
It was more of a pencil dive.
What a transition.
There we go. Today's episode of Falcons Final Whistle is brought to you by Zaxby's. And after a long game, when I'm tired and I need to refuel, I turn to Zaxby's. Their marinated, hand-breaded, fried to perfection chicken fingers, they hit the spot every time. Get yours with seasoned crinkle fries, a nice drink, and whichever of their 12 signature sauces you're feeling at the moment. But it always hits just right. So next time you need to refuel, go get yourself some Zaxby's. So let's do, we'll start out with, and these are our final whistles, our first annual final whistles.
Yay!
Just a good little way to go through the season and relive some favorite moments, maybe some down moments, talk about some guys one last time.
Yeah.
So most entertaining game of the season. Taryn, we'll start with you.
Week 2, the 22-21 win against the Eagles.
I also have Philly week 2.
There we go.
It was the most exciting game. I was really, really close to doing Washington a couple weeks ago, but I ended up landing on Philly because of what that final 133 seconds of the game, the last minute of the game.
133.
I think that's what it was.
I like just thinking about you going back
1 minute and 39 seconds. The Falcons were down 21-15, as you'll remember. They had 6 plays for 70 yards in 1 minute and 5 seconds with the Kirk Cousins 7-yard touchdown to Drake London. The Eagles had 34 seconds to pull ahead, to win the game essentially.
To make their own game-winning drive.
Exactly. And knowing that Eagles offense, especially with Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, Saquon Barkley, 34 seconds was a lot for them. Mm-hmm. But instead, Jalen Hurts tried to throw a deep ball to Devontae Smith and instead found Jesse Bates for that game-clinching interception. And I think just the timing of the game, too, made it much more exciting because the Falcons were coming off that loss to the Steelers and former head coach Arthur Smith. Mm-hmm. So to come in and beat the Eagles on the road in prime time in such a crazy environment. Probably one of my favorite stadiums just to experience a game in general. And so that one was definitely the most entertaining.
It was. I mean, I think it was the moment where you felt like everything that I felt like we had been talking about up to that point was like coming to fruition. This is a team that's going to be competitive. This is a team that's going to find a way to win, that's going to will itself to a win. This is a team that has the veteran experience of Kirk Cousins, who's going to be able to lead the team.
Your star players are making big plays.
Yeah, it's like there were so many moments in that game where I was like, this is it. This is where things are turning. Things are different. It's kind of funny and also a little bit sad to think back to that, what I felt, I think, in that day and what I now feel months and months later.
We're picking our most entertaining game in week 2 when everyone says your best football should be played in December.
That's fair. You know what I was doing during your most entertaining game? I was sleeping because I was in Italy.
Oh.
That is true.
I remember waking up at like 2 a.m. my time and looking at the score, and I think it was like 6-3 going into halftime. And I was like, oh, that's good. I'm going to go to bed now.
Again.
And so I just woke back up, and everybody, it was, obviously seeing the final score. I was like, hey, that's great. We're going to Capri. So, I'll celebrate when we get back.
Honestly, yeah. Will probably had it better than anyone.
It was a great week for all of us, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Mine is a little bit different. It's the Thursday night win against Tampa Bay. I just think from start to finish, obviously that's the game where Kirk sets the all-time single-game passing record for the Falcons. Kadarius Hodge has that incredible walk-off touchdown where, I'll still remember exactly this play unfolding from my seat in the press box.
Yeah.
It's like he caught the ball, and then a defender spun him around a little bit, and then he, just got let go at the perfect angle to split the defense and race to the end zone. Then him getting held up like Newt Rockney and carried off the field.
So
it was just such a fun game from start to finish, defensively, offensively. Younghoe Koo making some big kicks in that one. So it was just I think a great time all around. The primetime games this year were ultimately really fun for Atlanta. I mean, you mentioned Washington, that was another one. There was a good slate of primetime games, and I think the Falcons by and large lived up to kind of the moment in a lot of those. They didn't always win, but...
Right. No, you make a good point, because even the Kansas City game in week 3, that was a good game.
Yeah.
That was a close game. And the only one that I would be like, meh, meh, was the Monday night against the Raiders.
Yes.
That was tough. That was just tough football, regardless of how
there
you
were some
look at
fun losses, and fun is maybe the wrong word. Some compelling losses, but that was a lackluster win.
Yeah.
Tori, we'll stay with you. Who was your favorite player to talk about this year?
So it's funny because Will almost said that this award was going to be the Caden Ellis Award because of how often I talked about Caden Ellis this year, because I didn't miss a chance to talk about Caden Ellis or brag about Caden Ellis or talk about the usage of Caden Ellis, and I stand by that. Here we are at the end of the season. We're wrapping up the 2024 season, putting a nice little bow on it. Well, maybe not nice, but we're putting a bow on it, and I'm just really happy that kind of what I said back in training camp before the season started about how important I thought Caden Ellis was to this defense and how fun the usage of him could be and how interesting and how unlike anything else you're doing with off-ball linebackers. I was really happy that it turned out that way.
This is like your Apple stock.
You
were ahead of the curve, and then now you're just reaping in the benefits.
I know, everybody's talking about
early, and
everybody's talking about Caden Ellis and his usage, and I was like, where were y'all in June? When I first brought this up. So nice pat on my back.
That's the second pat on your back today.
Yeah. Big day for old Tor.
There you go. What about you?
I did Kadarius Hodge.
Okay.
Because Pro Bowler, first time in his career, first of all, but he just had he had a lot of cannonballs that actually splashed. To stick with an analogy that I just made up on the whim.
Coined, yep.
No, I don't know about coined. And because you had the 2 blocked punts, essentially. I know one wasn't technically blocked, but we'll give it to him on this podcast. You had the muff punt recovered for a touchdown, and then you had that walk-off touchdown that you already described in overtime. And this is somebody who normally wouldn't get any flowers because he's not a starter. You have Drake London and Darnell Mooney starting at wide receiver, and that's Kadarius' position normally, but he has to make a name for himself on special teams. And he said it himself once, that he's like, I'll die by every play. I'm going to give it my all. And you see that from him. And it's nice to see someone who works so hard and doesn't take a single snap for granted actually shine.
Yeah.
And see it all pay off and be very grateful for it and not really asking for more, just making the most out of each opportunity.
No, I really do think you felt that energy every single time he was out there on the field. And I can't remember if he was involved in one of these, but I think he was. They had 3 or 4 prevented fake punts this year.
Probably.
Which we always just gloss over when we're talking about special teams, but a lot of times on like 4th and 2, teams ran a fake punt and the Falcons sniffed out every single one, which is kind of crazy. And I think he had a hand in at least one of those. So big year for Kaderil Hodge, big year for Bijan Robinson, and that is my pick. Finished, I believe, 3rd in rushing yards, 4th in overall yards from scrimmage, tied for 7th with Saquon Barkley. In touchdowns this year, he had 15. You know, I got to say, like coming into the season or into training camp when everybody was talking about the Christian McCaffrey type of role, I was like, all right, but can he be that workhorse running back who gets 30 carries a game? You know, can he be Michael Turner-esque? And they're very different body types. Like Bijan is not slight, but he's smaller than your typical like rocked up, like give me the football and let me just go to town on the inside. And like he did it and then some. He was such a huge facet of this offense every single game and in different ways. You know, like I thought actually in the Washington game, I went into that being like, they are going to attack the outsides off tackle. And they kind of, the first 2 drives, like ran them right up the middle. And I was like, this is ingenious. It reminded me almost of Warwick Dunn back in the day where it's like, you don't expect somebody of his size to be as effective in between the guards like that. And his just vision, his smoothness, like every part of it, the number of times he just like walked into the end zone from the 2-yard line and just everybody was kind of like chasing him and then he made him miss, like the Tampa Bay guy who just, he stopped and let him run right past. He was like, excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
After you. I'll score. I'll wait.
So savage.
Bijan was kind of like, to me, a defining player of the season this year. Now we've got our biggest what-if moment, and you mentioned the Kansas City game. My biggest what-if moment is what if they made that 4th down conversion against Kansas City?
Great.
Because
Great one.
I do think they would have scored a touchdown there.
Yeah.
And if they had, it's hard to say the season would have turned out differently because that's week 3.
Yeah.
But you would have gotten another win. I
Yeah.
do think that would have instilled a lot of confidence. The team was successful early on, but imagine if you're 7-2 at that point, right? And I'm sure there are some moments that we're about to get to where maybe it would have played a bigger role for the second half of the season. But I just kind of feel like after that Eagles game and kind of what you were saying about the feeling of the team at the time, you doubled down on that. You get another big win against Patrick Mahomes, going for it on 4th down. The aggressiveness pays off. Who knows? So that was kind of my moment. But what do you have, Tori?
The non-timeout after the Darnell Mooney catch at the end of the Washington game.
People are just cheering wherever they're listening right now.
to your point of you don't know kind of like as the season goes on, you don't really know how things are going to shake out divisional standings. At that point in time against Washington, if the Falcons were to win that game, they would have, I do believe, won the NFC South. And the fact that it was so close to the point that we're having to talk about a timeout that was not called after that Darnell Mooney catch, which put them at midfield, and they couldn't get to the point of being able to kick a field goal that they felt good about and had to go to overtime and ultimately lost that game. On a prime time with all the playoff implications on the line, that's my biggest what-if moment. If you call that timeout, does it put you in a better position to win that game and kick a field goal to win it?
Yeah. I think it's one of the key what-ifs of the entire season.
Yeah.
Taryn, what's yours?
So I hate what ifs personally because like I don't like necessarily looking back and wanting to change things because I believe everything happens for a reason.
You're an eyes ahead type of gal.
I don't know.
Love
like,
it.
But because I've been prompted the question, I can't, and this will explain why I don't know how I feel about what ifs. What if they had played Michael Penix Jr. earlier? Because you can see in real time the connections he was building with his receivers. You could see him learning in real time, like from his own mistakes. And I just kind of wanted to see like 1 or 2 more games out of him. Like, had they made the playoffs, what would he have done? And so if I think back, if they had started him earlier, would those connections have built more? Would they have been stronger during the Washington game, for example, when the stakes were on the line? But at the same time, if you did that, when?
Right.
And you can't take away Kirktober. So it's kind of like they did they put him in at the best spot that they thought they could have, but what if?
Yeah, because
So I don't know.
That's the thing, right? Is there's a little bit of revisionist history when people are asking that specific question: is why didn't they go to Michael Penix? But if you go through the timeline,
You can't.
it makes sense,
Yeah.
right? The Saints game was the first time after that Kirktober where it was like weird, but also that was a kicking thing.
Yep.
And there was a
Denver-
brand new head coach there.
Yeah.
Or interim head coach.
Right. So you always get that new
Fluky in New
the interim
Orleans.
coach bounce, and then Denver was just like everybody was having a
yeah.
bad day that day. Come back out of the bye week, then it's the Chargers. All right, that's a real issue with Kirk. All right, that was a hey, we got to be better here. But then you're going to Minnesota. You're not going to put Michael Penix in that environment.
Right.
Also, given the Kirk of it all. In that return.
Also, to the point, like I wrote about this, like you needed to give Kirk the opportunity
Yes.
to right the ship
Right.
himself.
Yeah.
And so if we're starting at the Chargers game,
Yep.
and the interceptions that he threw, and
You say bounce back.
bounce back, and that's what you talk about going into Minnesota.
You didn't have a bad game in Minnesota. You threw that late pick, which
Right.
that was then becoming again like a troubling
thing.
concern. But by and large, like it was 21-21 at one point, and like going into the second half, and they were in that game.
yeah.
Yeah.
Until they weren't.
Until they weren't, and so then it was Vegas, and that was where you should roll over this team. And Raheem Morris said we felt good about all aspects of that game. Outside of the quarterback position, and then they make that move. So again, I would have loved to see Michael Penix Jr. too, more so because I just think the guys got it.
It's just selfish
But-
reasons more so
Yeah.
than logistical reasons.
Exactly. All right, so let's go to the expectation that never manifested. So this was a preseason expectation that just never came to fruition for one reason or another. Tori,
Kyle Pitts' breakout year.
good one.
I really thought going into this year, this is a guy who's fully healthy. He has gotten his fifth-year option picked up. He has a quarterback who, at the time, was one of the most accurate guys in the game. And you expected the production to look more like it did his rookie year, and it just didn't really happen. And there were a lot of games where we were kind of left sitting there being like, where's Kyle Pitts? And what is he doing? And where is he? And how are they involving him? And
Yeah. You even saw flashes of it early.
Yeah,
but
you
then,
did.
Yeah.
And then you see like the touchdown from Michael Penix to Kyle Pitts at the end of the Washington game, and so you saw him, but did you see him
was
enough?
out there.
Yeah, but did you see him enough? I don't think so. Not
No.
for a number 4 overall pick. I said this time and time again. I thought in the last 3 games of the season, Drake London, Bijan Robinson, and Michael Penix Jr. played up to the level of their draft pick.
Yep.
I don't know if I can say the same thing for Kyle Pitts in a year where he really, really needed to.
I think it's entirely fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. Taryn.
Mine's short and sweet with a winning record. I mean, 7th consecutive losing season, 7th consecutive season where you did not make the playoffs. You only had one more win than the past 3 years, and the past 3 years felt completely different, I feel like, than this season. And so to only pull off like a slight advantage over the past 3, I don't know. That's where I was like, this is, to use Terry Fontenot's words, disappointing.
Yeah, that's where even though the season finale wouldn't have mattered in a playoff sense, it may
9
have
and
mattered
8 would
a
feel
little
a lot
bit.
different
Yeah,
than 8
just
and
for the
9.
feeling when not right now necessarily, but 3 months from now.
Yeah.
Next season when you're looking back, like just 9 and 8 feels better, obviously.
Yeah.
So mine involves Justin Simmons. I thought he would be a difference maker. And it's not to say he played poorly. Like he had his moments. He picked off Patrick Mahomes against Kansas City. I think he finished with 2 interceptions this year. Like he was a starter pretty much throughout the entire season, unless when he was in the lineup. But he wasn't to that level that I fully expected and that he had shown in Denver. So
Best dressed,
again,
though.
Yeah, he does have
yeah.
a
The game day
great
fits.
wardrobe. Yep.
The houndstooth to end the season.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think I
Shout
talked
out
to
to
him.
the Gentleman's Playbook, who is the people who dress him.
Oh, well,
they tagged
if
me
you
on
want to
some-
dress me, we can get you as a sponsor on this podcast.
Right,
so,
yeah.
Hit me up, Gentleman's
Falcons
Playbook.
Final
and,
Whistle brought to you by the Gentleman's Playbook.
Yes. Ooh, oh, God, I'm so excited for
Do
my
you do
future
ladies
fits.
ladies
Oh, boy.
playbook?
All right, so let's now do Unsung Hero of the Team. Taryn, we'll start with you.
JD Bertrand.
Ooh,
Wow.
okay. Really?
Yeah.
Okay,
Wow.
explain.
Because he was a 5th round draft pick. He
Yeah.
played in more games
Captain
than any
America.
other rookie. I think he was in such a strong position group when you talk about Caden Ellis, Troy Anderson, and Nate Landman, that he could just be a sponge and absorb it and learn from all of them, especially when all 3 of them are so different with their skill sets that JD can kind of just become Captain America and take the best out of all of them if you want to keep with the nickname.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just think he stepped up when needed because Troy Anderson wasn't completely healthy. Nate Landman dealt with injuries. Caden Ellis was healthy all season long. But to throw JD in there with someone like Caden Ellis, I feel like he stepped up to the plate.
Yeah, that's a great pick because I do think his presence late in the year helped the defense when it was evolving a little bit after the bye week. So who you got, Tori?
Charlie Warner.
Okay.
As someone who, y'all know, I love some old school, let's put our nose in the ground and let's just run over some people. I don't think that's the saying, but
yeah,
whatever.
Nose to the grindstone? Hard nose football, a lot of nose analogies.
Yeah, so that. But I do not overlook Charlie Warner's role in the run game and what he was able to do as an extension of the offensive line, and that's what they call him. And I really appreciate kind of this old school nature of which he plays the position with and how he just loves the role that he has carved out for himself. And the fact that like when Bijan got over 1,000 rushing yards, it was the offensive line and they pulled Charlie into the photo and was like, you're a part of this too. And I just loved watching him play. And I loved being able to break down film and watch the All 22 and seeing how much of a difference he made in Bijan and Tyler getting to the next level.
Yeah, it reminds me of when, like, you know, an offensive lineman comes out and they designate him as an eligible receiver. Charlie Warner's like an eligible receiver who's designated as an offensive lineman.
Yeah.
So that's a great call. And I think the success Bijan had, and Tyler too, like that definitely owes a lot to Charlie. Mine is somebody who was a starter throughout the year, but just didn't get, I think, the recognition relative to his play, and that's Mike Hughes. You know, A.J. Terrell had, in my opinion, just as good of a year as he did in his second season when he was a second-team All-Pro, and they were throwing at Mike Hughes a lot. They were throwing at D. Alford a lot, and I think Mike Hughes handled it really, really well. He, you know, the end of the season maybe wasn't as strong as like the first 3 quarters of it. But again, he was somebody when we look back at training camp and preseason and talked all about who is going to be that number 2 corner and the Clark Phillips, Mike Hughes battle, he just took that job and ran with it. Yep. And he shut down a few really good passing games in addition to Justin Simmons, Jesse Bates. God, this is just, we're ending the way we started. Let's go, baby. All right, so let's now do a Taryn favorite over here, a standout stat of the year. This is the Taryn Walk Award.
Guys, don't call me a nerd. It's not even that like nuanced of a stat, so I am a little bit like, oh, I should have done better. But in just his second season, Bijan Robinson broke into the top 10 in rushing because he has 2,432 career yards now. That puts him at number 10. What makes this so interesting is Tyler Algier is 11 with 2,362 career yards, and Tyler came in with 742 yards on Bijan.
Ahead of Bijan on that list, yeah.
Ahead of Bijan. And Bijan was like, surpass.
So those are the career all-time rushing yards for the Falcons.
Yeah, career. And so, like, Bijan's already in the top 10 in year 2. Tyler's in the top 11 because of Bijan in year 3. But I just think it's crazy that Bijan, even though Tyler had such a head start statistically, was able to pass him.
That it is crazy. It's something I didn't even realize when I tweeted it out that Tyler had moved into the top 10. It was like, actually, Bijan's in there now, and Tyler's 11. It's like, that was so not on my radar because that's honestly how incredible it is.
Yeah.
So, Tori, what is yours?
I'm going to stick with actually a Bijan stat as well.
I've got a Bijan stat too.
Really?
So
oh, boy.
That's crazy.
Let's go, Bijan.
That just goes to show like what type of season he had.
Yep.
Yeah.
But my Bijan standout stat of the year, that he led the league in missed tackles forced.
Let's go.
Was that what you had?
That's what I had.
I just I couldn't not pick that one because I've talked on this podcast so much about how special of a talent that I feel like Bijan Robinson is and the way he plays and how I don't understand it. It's almost like alien-esque to a certain extent, and no one else can really do what he does. And it's very special, and I thought that stat, as much as any stat, shows you that aspect of his game. How he can make these split-second moves and decisions, and almost his anticipation is off the charts. Again, one of one type of player.
There was a play in that Carolina game in the season finale that where they were right on the goal line and he kind of gets it and everybody is where he is heading. And I was just like, he's not going to break through. And then he just kind of like, again, manipulates his speed so well to let everything unclutter in front of him. And then when he notices there's my gap.
Yeah.
Boom, he hits the accelerator and goes. Like, he doesn't have that elite top end speed, but if you look at the number of plays, I don't have this stat directly in front of me, but it's a next gen stat, and I believe he is, if not number one, in the top 3 of number of times he has hit like 15 plus miles per hour at the line of scrimmage. Like, his acceleration is underrated when we talk about kind of his overall speed, and that is, I think, a huge part of it, in addition to that lateral agility that he has, and he credits Allen Iverson too. So
I love it.
big Bijan year, and it needed to be. But now we're going to go to a newcomer to the team, our Newcomer of the Year award. I'll go first. I've got, and I would be surprised if nobody else has him, Darnell Mooney.
I also have Darnell
There
Mooney.
we go.
Yeah, 3 for 3.
Yeah.
That's our first match.
It's there we go. Triple match. Game, set, match.
There you go.
We'll
Yeah.
figure it out. It's so frustrating that he finished shy of 1,000 yards, right? Like, that is
okay.
heartbreaking.
My thing is with that,
for one play.
I was like, just run a 10-yard out route and just
Have
throw
him
him
hop
the
on
ball.
Charlie Warner's back and let him
Literally.
run down the field and catch the ball.
Just the first play, like take the kickoff at the 20-yard line instead. Give him a 10-yard pass. Then you're basically where you were going to start anyways if it was a touchback.
I just was
Agreement with the other team.
I was so upset when I saw that he was on the inactives list, and I was just like, no! Like, I was so mad because, like, 8 yards.
Michael
8.
Penix Jr. even said beforehand in the week leading up to that game, was like, I'll get that for him.
I do
and
think-
he wasn't given the opportunity.
Yep.
I do think that it had to have been something seriously wrong with his shoulder. Like, he popped up in the middle of the
Because you
injury
know he
report.
would have, like, if he could have, he would have played.
Yeah, like, upsetting.
But
It's
his chemistry with Kirk Cousins was one of the early highlights of the year. Just him, like, kind of breaking out in a way that I don't think people expected here in Atlanta. Like, yeah, everybody thought he was going to come in and be an upgrade at the number 2 receiver position, but there were plenty of games where he was your number 1 receiver, and that's, no slight to Drake. They both finished with like over 100 yards, I think, a few different times this season. And, like, I'll never forget that pass against Tampa Bay where Kirk was just kind of like YOLO and threw it up to Darnell in triple coverage, and he came down with it. And it was like, man, this guy, he was out to prove something. You could tell that in training camp, and he did. And it was really exciting, I think, to see Darnell Mooney in a Falcons uniform.
Yeah, one more thing
year.
about Darnell. If you are listening and you followed my advice at the beginning of the year when we were doing kind of our preseason predictions, and I said, Darnell Mooney's going to be impactful, he's going to get some yards, and you picked him up on your fantasy team, you're welcome. You owe me a drink. If that is the case. If I'm talking to someone out there, I feel like someone had to have.
You're like, it's like Mad Money in here. She's just like, buy low on Darnell Mooney, buy low. Get in on Caden Ellis while you can.
Charlie Warner, gang. Like, I have the people who I love. Like,
There you go.
and they loved me back,
It's a love story.
Yeah.
Just say yes.
Say yes.
All
my
right,
gosh.
so let's go to highlight of the year. Tori, we'll go right back to you.
Here's the thing. Hear me out on this.
Oh boy.
Kirktober. And I think that Kirktober is the highlight of the year because that was the most fun I had covering this team in a very, very, very long time. It was electric what they were able to do
Boogie, woogie,
against
woogie.
Tampa Bay. It was, putting the wins together, putting the performance together that they did, the fact that Kirk Cousins broke Matt Ryan's record on the night that Matt Ryan was inducted to the Ring of Honor.
Yeah, that's something.
That was a lot.
It was Kirktober, and then like Kirk coming into the press conference and talking about swag surfing and having the beanie on and being like, walk into your trap, take over your trap. Like, there were so many things that happened in the month of October where I was just like I felt the connection between the fan base and the team for the first time in a really long time. And it's also a highlight because it was like, that's how good it could have been. Like, that was it. Like, that was what you wanted. That was what the Falcons envisioned, and it was this like flash in the pan of.
It was his Icarus moment.
It was. He flew too close to the sun, and I just the like significant downward spiral after that.
Well, but that's why.
It was
the timeline of everybody saying they should have gone to Michael Penix. It's because of you're coming off of that.
Yeah.
When he was
How do you
playing
let Kirktober
so
go?
well,
Yeah.
right? And you just got
He had the
caught
most
up in
passing.
Kirktober.
He had the leading He was the leader in passing yards in the month of October. Like it was so fun for me personally covering the team. Like the locker room was fun. Guys were having a good time. Like, and then it just went downhill. And again, flew too close to the sun. But it will remain a highlight of, I think, the 2024 season. When I think of the 2024 season, I will think of Kirktober and how crazy those games were and how much fun it was covering this team, but also the ramifications of Kirktober in the month of November.
There you go. Taryn, what about you?
I'm going to go with the defensive turnaround after the bye week.
Oh, that's
where
great.
They went from, 10 sacks in 11 games before the bye, but 16 sacks in 6 games after the bye. Forget about Carolina.
Was it 16? I think it was 21.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Depends when Omna's story ran, because that's where I got my numbers.
I believe it ran.
21,
I think it ran before or after or before that Giants game.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's 21.
Or maybe Washington. Yeah, maybe
So it
one
was
after,
16
yep.
in 4 games.
But they had the most in the league through the 5 games heading into the final week of the season.
She had the numbers already for me. I added Carolina, which was nothing, and I was like, well, this is it. Okay. So there were 2 games after this story ran. But anyways, it was a great turnaround. And I just they kept crediting self-scouting. I'm like, what did you see? Like, explain it to me. And Jimmy wouldn't, but it's just, it's such a mad turnaround that I question sometimes the defense took the bye and made the most out of it. What did the offense do during the bye?
It
Or
remains
is
to
a
be seen.
hypothetical
I
question?
both
Remains to be seen.
hypothetical
Yeah.
and I feel like a no answer is also the best answer.
I mean,
the silence spoke volumes.
That's true. Crickets.
Yeah. No, for real. And I'll tell you what they did differently. Going back to my Tori McElhaney Award favorite player to talk about, Caden Ellis.
But that's defense.
Yeah.
That's
the defense did that.
You said when you said
I
Jimmy
thought you were saying
didn't
what
answer.
happened with the offense.
No, when you said
I thought you were
Jimmy
answering
didn't
my hypothetical.
Yeah. I'm answering the question of what did the
I was
defense
hoping
do?
we would get one of these moments in our final season pod. This
Right,
is,
yeah. No, I was answering the question of what did the defense do?
Defense, okay.
They had more elaborate blitzes. They used Caden Ellis in a really fun, cool way, as I said they should have from the beginning. And they were just winning their one-on-ones up front. Let's be honest. Sometimes it's just as simple as that.
Well,
AK.
You guys didn't actually pick highlights. Mine is a single play highlight, and it is Kyle Pitts' 4th down catch from Michael Penix Jr. That sent essentially the game in overtime
That
against
he
Washington.
did not know was the first touchdown pass of Michael Penix Jr.'s career.
He tried to just yeet that ball into the stands, and fortunately,
Drake is running after it no!
Yeah.
Fortunately, it didn't make it all the way there. So Michael Penix got to keep that ball. Good for him. I think it was just one of the hopefully many highlights that he will provide in a Falcons uniform. But on 4th down, to see him just rip that ball in there. DJ Shockley had a great breakdown of the play on a film review recently, so go check that out. But it was just such a great kind of moment on the road in that environment, and you saw the proof of concept with all the arm strength, and he threw it over the middle, which we needed to see, and we saw it. So it was a big moment for both of them.
Honorable mention, the Michael Penix touchdown against the Panthers in Week 18, where he laid out to the front pylon.
He kept that ball too.
Yeah, I think
I would.
Yeah, it was our social team put together a photo of Michael Vick doing that, almost same exact thing, and the picture of Michael Penix doing it, and I was like, all right, this is what to your point, this is what you're going to see, you hope, in the years to come.
Yeah. Julio also had a similar diving play in that exact end zone at that exact pylon. So, big moments from our big stars in Falcons history.
What was really sweet on the last day of the locker room and whatnot, clean out day, Penix did a kind of closing interview, and he had the rushing touchdown ball in his arm, and then he had something else that I can't remember, another touchdown, I think. But point is, multiple people are like, do you want to put it down? He's like, no. And then Matt Haley from Comms is like, do you want me to hold it? He's like, no, these are way too special
Definitely not
to
you,
me.
Matt. Get away.
So he's holding him and cradling the ball throughout the entire interview, and he was just happy, not happy about how the season ended, but talking about those highlighted moments, you could see a genuine smile on his face.
Yeah, it means a lot.
Especially with what's to come.
And where he came from. The journey to the NFL, right? Knee injuries, and going to Washington and making that situation work. So we've got 2 left, and we are already a little bit over time, so we're going to make this quick. The main thing to address this offseason, Taryn, we'll go with you first.
Kirk Cousins and his expensive contract is what I wrote down.
Okay. Yeah, I think we heard from Terry on that front, and remains to be seen, but that's a great one. Mine is the number 2 corner spot. Mike Hughes is set to be a free agent. So is T. Alford. So, is that a potential area they look in the draft if you feel better about your pass rush? I don't know, but that's a spot that's going to see a lot of action given the way that A.J. Terrell has played.
I also said cornerback opposite A.J. Terrell.
Ooh, yeah.
Could you bring Mike Hughes back? I think you could. I think the thought could be there to bring him back on a shortened contract, and then also think about drafting somebody or going out and getting somebody else in free agency.
Yeah.
The first domino is Kirk Cousins' contract, though, because money.
My thing is that when it comes to the cornerback position, I have been saying since A.J. Terrell got here that he needs a running mate. He needs someone
They've tried. Jeff Okudah's been here.
I know.
Casey Hayward's been here.
I know. He has had a different running mate for every single year that he's been here.
That's true.
And I'm ready to see some stability over. And if that's Mike Hughes, it's Mike Hughes. I'll be okay with that. If it's someone that they draft, it's someone that they draft.
I love it. All right. So last one is I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. This is, again, the title says it all. Mm-hmm. You just wanted maybe a little bit more and you didn't get it. So, Tori?
The Falcons didn't outrun the South. It was the one thing. It was their rallying cry. It was the thing that they said that they wanted to do, and that was their goal of 2024, and they did not do it. And I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
They did what I did in the Krispy Kreme 5K in 2014 in Athens, Georgia. Just hot out of the gates and then winded in the back half.
There you go.
Taryn, what you got?
I did Troy Anderson.
Okay.
Because injuries just plagued his entire season. And
not just his entire season, his whole career so far.
I was getting there.
Oh, sorry.
And so, this year, you were hoping he was gonna be healthy because last year he spent all of it on IR, and then he had a really strong rookie season. So you're kind of looking back to that year one, wanting to see that again. But even in the middle of the season where they didn't put him on IR, it's just he missed so many games, and you kind of wonder what would the defense look like if he was healthy? Because when he was out there, he was a difference maker if he was healthy.
NFC Defensive Player of the Week against the Saints, and then IR the next. And it's really tough, but yeah, he's tantalizing for sure. Mine is Kirk Cousins. I get it, right? Coming off of an injury, that's in a tough spot. And everybody, has maintained he was healthy. That didn't play a role, but kind of you get where maybe the mindset was pushing so hard this offseason to get back to prove it and then to have it kind of start trending down and being able to pull out of it or not being able to pull out of it. I kind of feel for him. So I can't be mad because I just could put myself in those shoes, and it's got to be really tough and really hard. And I think he handled it very well. I think his press conference, something I'll never forget after Michael Penix was named the starter and going out and having to kind of face the media like that. Thought he handled it really, really well. He has done what he said he would do and be a great backup to Michael Penix. So, I think that Kirk Cousins, the person, is still very high in my estimation, even if the player left me a little bit disappointed this year. But hopefully this podcast did not leave you disappointed, dear listener, and that is a segue of all segues. Let's go. So that will do it for this episode of Falcons Final Whistle, but there is a lot more to come during the offseason, so stay tuned. Don't know exactly when the next one will be, but we will have a schedule pretty soon, and we will let everybody know. So follow us on social media. I'm at Will McFadden.
At Tori _McElhaney.
There you go.
At Taryn Walk.
Beautiful. So that will do it for us today. Thank you guys again, and we will see you next time.